Hey, architecture firm owners and emerging leaders. Get ready for unparalleled insight into the development of a world-class architecture firm and a worldwide organization driving the digital transformation of the design and construction industry. With Build Smart, the podcast that's changing how our profession operates. We share the incredible stories behind innovation in the building industry with my friend and co-host, Patrick McLeamy, FAIA, former CEO of the international architecture firm, HOK.
You know, Yamasaki's office or firm lasted during his lifetime. And when he passed away, I think that was the end of the Yamasaki office. Helmut did not want that. He wanted a firm that would live out and grow beyond the founders.
In Season 1, discover the untold stories behind HOK's meteoric rise, from 150 employees in St. Louis to a powerhouse with over 1,900 staff members and 27 offices worldwide.
You know, they weren't as polite as the Kojima people. That was just boom. And anytime you have a creditor, whether it's Kojima or the bank, that wants their money, unless you can raise money someplace else, you are out of business.
Bankrupt. And hold on tight for Season 2, where Patrick takes us on a new adventure as chairman of Building Smart International, shaping the future of digital transformation in the design, construction, and operation of built assets.
Ian Howell, Ken Harold, and I, Ken was my technical representative from HOK. The three of us took a tour of Europe of 5 cities in 5 days. Very busy time.
Simply follow the link in the show notes to subscribe to Build Smart now and uncover lessons that will transform you and your architecture firm. Hey, architecture firm owners and emerging leaders. Get ready for unparalleled insight into the development of a world-class architecture firm and a worldwide organization driving the digital transformation of the design and construction industry. With Build Smart, the podcast that's changing how our profession operates. We share the incredible stories behind innovation in the building industry with my friend and co-host, Patrick McLeamy, FAIA, former CEO of the international architecture firm, HOK.
You know, Yamasaki's office or firm lasted during his lifetime. And when he passed away, I think that was the end of the Yamasaki office. Helmut did not want that. He wanted a firm that would live out and grow beyond the founders.
In Season 1, discover the untold stories behind HOK's meteoric rise, from 150 employees in St. Louis to a powerhouse with over 1,900 staff members and 27 offices worldwide.
You know, they weren't as polite as the Kojima people. That was just boom. And anytime you have a creditor, whether it's Kojima or the bank, that wants their money, unless you can raise money someplace else, you are out of business.
Bankrupt. And hold on tight for Season 2, where Patrick takes us on a new adventure as chairman of Building Smart International, shaping the future of digital transformation in the design, construction, and operation of built assets.
Ian Howell, Ken Harold, and I, Ken was my technical representative from HOK. The three of us took a tour of Europe of 5 cities in 5 days. Very busy time.
Simply follow the link in the show notes to subscribe to Build Smart now and uncover lessons that will transform you and your architecture firm. My name is Mark R. LePage, and you are listening to Entre Architect Podcast, where each week I speak with inspiring, passionate people who share their knowledge and expertise, all to help you build a better business as a small firm entrepreneur architect. Randall Stevens, welcome to Entre Architect Podcast.
Thanks, Mark. Glad to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you here. You and I have spoken in the past a couple of times, and every time we connect, we are very much aligned with the way we think and the way we would like for this profession to move. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation. Let me introduce you to our listeners. Randall Stevens is an AEC industry veteran with 30 years of software development, sales, and management experience. Randall offers a unique combination of experience in software and graphics technology coupled with a background and degree in architecture. He founded ArchVision in 1991, a software development firm specializing in 3D graphics and content management technology for the design industry, and he's the inventor of the software technology Rich Photorealistic Content, RPC, currently being used by AEC customers in more than 100 countries. Most recently, Randall led product development of the AVAIL software platform, a fresh approach to the content management challenges most of any architects using BIM are experiencing. AVAIL is used by many of the world's largest architecture and engineering firms, and today Randall is CEO of AVAIL. So, Randall, I'm looking forward to this conversation. Before we jump into wherever this conversation leads us, I want to know more about you. I'd love to know your origin story. Go back to where you discovered architecture and maybe talk a little bit about who inspired you or what inspired you to follow that path.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess I'll start with where I am today. AVAIL and ArchVision are both headquartered in Lexington, Kentucky. So I'm a Kentucky native. I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains, a little town called Pikeville, Kentucky, in the eastern part of the state, borders Virginia and West Virginia. And, I've thought about all, you usually look back and try to think about like what led you down these paths, got you thinking the way you think. And so I've done plenty of that ruminating. And, I think growing up, it was a great place to grow up. That's what I always tell people, because the bad part of it is you're isolated, but the good part of it is you're isolated. Right. So I think, I'll be 55 years old this year. Grew up in the 70s. There were plenty of resources there. It was big. It was coal country. So there was a lot of money. The schools were good. Community was tight, but just not a lot of people. So I think I kind of grew up, with my imagination. I got to spend plenty of time playing in the woods and doing all those things that maybe nurtures the imagination. At least that was the case for myself. And then, from an architecture standpoint, I always thought I wanted to be an architect. From the time I was young, I loved to draw. I loved to, I'd see, growing, it's not a bastion. Kentucky itself is probably not a bastion for architecture, for sure. Being in the mountains of Eastern Kentucky wasn't a bastion, but every time I'd travel and get to travel and see things, I would just be like amazed by the buildings I saw. And I can remember going to the grocery store with my mom, and I'd go straight to the big magazine section and go, Architectural Digest or anything that had like house plans or anything like that. I just growing up, loved that and was always, sketching and drawing out, and building in my own head, like my house of the future, kind of grew up thinking like that. So probably,
Do you remember the time or who maybe introduced you to the profession of architecture, like that you realized, oh, there's something that I could actually do with those buildings?
You know what? I was actually, the answer is no, but what I remember is when I got talked out of it. So, which maybe, more of people in the profession are like, never, don't do it. Don't go down that path. But, the other thing that I was either, I'd say blessed, being born when I was born, the personal computer, was basically born when I was the right age to be, a young teenager. And,
right.
So I got into the computer side as a teenager. And so by the time I graduated high school, which was in 1985, I was thinking I was going to go to school and I wanted to do something around computers and software. The bad part about going to school in 1985 was there usually was no such thing as like computer science. That didn't exist. So I came to the University of Kentucky to go to school, and they put me in electrical engineering because, anytime you said the word computer, you kind of got stuffed into a degree program. So I started off in electrical engineering. I lasted about 3 semesters, once you got into circuits and, I did all the calculus and all that. I'm like, this is not what I thought this was going to be. Luckily, the University of Kentucky had has had and continues to have an excellent architecture school, now College of Design, but at the time was a 5-year architecture program. So I decided, like, either I'm going to switch my degree now and go into something that's more interesting that I'll stick with, or maybe school's not for me. But anyway, I applied to the architecture. It was a selective degree program, got accepted, and started that 5-year degree program my junior year in, my third year basically of school. Yeah. And accelerated it. It took me about 6 years total to get out, but wouldn't have traded it for anything. I mean, I loved it. Absolutely just fell in love with the making and then the story of how I professionally became what I became was to combine my interest in the computer side of things. When I was in school in the late 80s, 3D graphics was all new, computing was all new. I took advantage of that while I was in school. I kind of self-taught myself a lot of the software that was around that I had access to, and became the expert. And I graduated in 91, started teaching immediately. So,
before you get into that, I have questions about that time in college, because you and I are around the same age. We went to school around the same time. And so I know in my architecture program, there were computers and there was CAD, but there was like really no computer classes for architects.
Exactly. There was four computers at the college that were upstairs on the third floor in a room that the only time people went in there was to play some games on them instead of, but I taught myself 3D modeling. I was using like AutoCAD at the time to build 3D models from, and got into the rendering and visualization side. And then
did you know you were going to do that when you left electrical engineering and went to architecture? Did you think you were going to sort of leave the computers behind and go into architecture and become an architect, or did you know that this was the plan? I'm going to combine these two things.
No, I had no idea. Right. I knew that I didn't want to be an electrical engineer by that point.
Right.
Sometimes
that was the next best
what
option.
You're not going to do instead of what you're going to do.
Yeah, sure.
So that was pretty clear that wasn't what was floating my boat. I got into for me, it was like just the creative outlet, and the first year architecture school, was all about making. So I was in the shop and making things, and, just all of those things that kind of scratched that itch. Yep. And then, as I got into probably the second year studios, that's when I discovered that there was this computer lab upstairs. Yeah. I can actually remember that there was one day that I came out into the hall and there was a bunch of people huddled around, and there was a person that was probably like an Autodesk reseller person that had a computer set up. And I can remember like peering over, around this crowd's shoulders, and there was like a computer screen with four, the typical 4 divided. Yeah. And it's like he drew something over here, and in this other window, like an elevation, it showed up. And it was just like, that's all.
Yeah, that's mind blown. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, what is that? That's like magic, right? And so I can actually remember that happening. And then at some point, I just began taking advantage of those resources up there. That's the one thing I actually taught for years in the design school. I now teach in the business school, but I always tell students, it's like, man, when you're here at the university, take advantage of, don't just do classes, just like take advantage of that. You've got all these resources over here. And, if you want to spend your time, there may not be somebody to teach you, but spend your time and go teach yourself. Right.
Yeah.
It's easier than ever now.
So you graduated, you started teaching. What happened from there?
Yeah, so that was I graduated the summer, like August of 91. And so I was, they wanted me to teach. So I started teaching, the students that were my classmates. All of a sudden I was their computer teacher. And I had started while I was in school. The other thing that happened was, I was good at the 3D graphic stuff. What started happening was people would call into the school, like professionals around the region would call in there asking if there was anybody that did this. And of course I was like the guy, so they would point them to me. Yeah. So I actually had a couple of paying jobs. When you're that young, you don't really know what to charge people or even what to ask or how any of that works. but I had done a couple of jobs and gotten paid to do them, 3D renderings or things like that. And so when I graduated, I was also the last two years I was in school. I worked at UPS on a midnight shift, so I had a job. So I graduated in the summer. I was like, I'll start teaching this class. I'll keep my job, and then I'd actually won this contest and won some software and had a computer and all this stuff. So I'm like, I'll just start doing this and see if I can, make a business out of it. So I started a company called ArchVision. A lot of people know because we eventually got into the software business, but it started as a services company. And so I was out, selling my services, and that company actually grew in the early 90s, mainly throughout the Southeast, I'd say, were most of our customers. But we were doing basically outsourced graphics rendering work for people. Because I was pretty technically minded, actually, what became the RPC technology, a lot of people maybe see and use. If you use Revit and you go in, Autodesk, the tree and foliage solution that ships out of there is that RPC technology that we developed. So a lot of people are familiar with it, but it's been around. We launched that technology in '98. And then once I got a taste of making a piece of software and selling it right to different people around the world, it's like I shut down the services business as fast as I could.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Got out of that business, and so for the last 23, 24 years, I've been in the software side of the business and industry, and what became AVAIL, which has been now in the market. I can't believe it's been this long, but it's been available for 5 years now. But we developed that, started developing it at ArchVision, and then it kind of had its own mission, enough difference that I spun it out into a separate company, and I've been running that company ever since.
And so explain what AVAIL is and what it does.
So AVAIL, we typically would say we're in the content management business, but I've started trying to use the word information. We kind of interchangeably use the words file equals content equals information equals data equal, it's kind of all the same stuff at some point when you start talking about it, it's just semantics. But we're basically helping firms manage and for people at their desk to get back to information as fast as they can. We're trying to come up kind of with a new tagline, but it's like, get to the information you need as fast as humanly possible. And everybody knows in this industry, we are swimming. One way to think about the architecture and engineering profession is, firms are services firms. The people in those firms are knowledge workers who are getting paid to take things out of their head and encode them in, usually some piece of software now, and get that information into something and then share it. So, when you think of it from that standpoint, it's like that information that we're producing and now producing it in volumes that, 10 years ago, or, orders of magnitude more of it being produced and shared. AVAIL is trying to solve the problem of how do we better organize and get back to that information, and not just get back to it, but connect it to each other. So we're doing a lot of things around, what we call related content, like information is related to each other. So how do we get those systems connected to each other so that related content can be connected to each other? And as we do our software development side of it, I started out calling it the butt in the seat. Like, we should always develop everything we do from the user backwards. Like, what are they trying to do every day, and can we solve their problem? Because if we can solve that problem from their vantage point, that's a pretty good place to start, right? To really think about how to solve the problem is. And if you look at today in the industry, that person who's sitting there doing design work, or, I'm actually just amazed that people can actually even get a building built, because it's like there's so much information that it takes to do that, and that information is far flung, right? It's all over the place. And so what we're trying to do is connect, touch that information and get it connected back in such a way that it's easier for people to put their hands on it and then share it with each other and communicate.
So is it much to do with the user interface, basically taking the information that's already there, organizing it in a way that's easier to understand, and then putting a layer over the top of it that makes it easier to access what you're looking for quickly?
Yeah, it's a really good way to describe it. We're always, part of our challenge is language, right? That there's not a lot of, there's not very clear ways to describe what it is that we're doing. So, it's an opportunity and a challenge, right? Is that we get to hopefully help plant the seeds of how to think about this. The way that I think about it, and have been the last few months talking with customers and potential customers about it, is, you'll hear a lot of times that people talk about data silos and information silos. And, the context of talking about those is that we have to knock them down. We have to knock down the silos, and we have to, get rid of all these, pockets of information of where this information and data becomes, I use the word trapped. I think that's a futile conversation to have. I don't think you're never going to get rid of data silos and information silos. Just the nature of having, different applications or different people even working on different aspects of this. It's by nature, it's just going to end up in silos. So what I've been saying more recently is thinking about how to navigate that information. So I've been starting to use the word navigation. So the way you're describing it as a layer kind of above that, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, look, you're not putting that information into AVAIL, even though that might be the words people say. What we're really doing is connecting those silos. So the data wants to live. I like to say it wants to live in certain places for specific kinds of reasons and choices that our customers make. So our goal is to let that live there, but ultimately be able to touch it and through AVAIL's interfaces, see it. So one of the things that we talk about in the way that we describe what we're doing is we're trying to make where information is go away. And a user shouldn't have to know where something is, because that's I've grown up, as I told you the backstory, I've grown up thinking and understanding networks and all this, but those are also very weird concepts when you really step back and think about it. So if you're not inclined to understand that or think about it, and also think I'm probably a very visual thinker, I know I am. So I probably build little pictures in my head about, even though these are bits and bytes moving around, they're almost like places to me in my brain, but that's not necessarily the way everybody else thinks and are able to put those mental pictures together. So a lot of what we are doing with AVAIL is it is a very visual front end to this info and data, because a lot of it is very visual in nature that we work with in this industry. And the idea is that if we connect those different sources, if all that can come together into one interface, then really it's just a matter of, is that the interface somebody goes to get the information to work? They don't have to think about going to some place. So it was a very weird way to describe when we first started working on this, but I used to say, if you step really far back from it, I used to say, look, the internet solved one problem. It started connecting information that lives on different websites and servers and places. And we all go to, Google or Bing, and you've got one interface to type in, and it'll tell you where to go. Right. And it sends you to that place. Well, I've always thought of this as the next phase, if we're really going to fix this, is you shouldn't have to go to that place. That information should come to you. So I used to say, what we really want to do is invert that model. We don't want to send you someplace. I want to bring that information to you. So one way to think about what we're doing with AVAIL is, as we connect to those places, we're bringing that information to you instead of you having to go to it. And, it's a very, those are like mental gymnastics to think about how to describe it. But I do think that that's the big picture problem. And if I want to jump, we can get into this conversation about what the future is. The next step is, not only will we help you search it and that information's there, but we'll actually start queuing up and we'll bring to you the information you need before you even know you need it. Right. So that's what gets interesting with machine learning and AI and some of the stuff that's starting to happen is, but you can't do any of that without having the systems, connected to each other and the data in there. Then we can start doing things that people will perceive as magical, which is what all software should be if you're doing it correctly, right? You should be like my moment in Pence Hall lobby when I saw 4 little,
right.
Warts. It was like magic.
Let's take a quick break to say thank you to our sponsors for their support of this episode. This episode is brought to you by BQE, the makers of BQE Core, systems and standard operating procedures. You already know that that's how to build a profitable business and find the freedom you want. You need systems and procedures. But you struggle with choosing which systems you need most and how to implement those systems quickly so you can get back to doing what you love most. The Designing Your Business Masterclass series was created by acclaimed architect and business consultant Douglas Teager to help fellow architects and engineers run their firms more profitably while maintaining a healthy work-life balance. Douglas grew from a solo practitioner to become managing partner of his 30-plus person firm and then later sold his firm so he can do what he does today, helping architects be more successful at Teager Consulting. On the third Wednesday of every month, Douglas dives deep into an essential topic that will strengthen the profitability of your firm and make it sustainable for growth in the years to come. Register now for the next Designing Your Business Masterclass with Douglas Teager at bqe.com/masterclass and start implementing powerful systems for the profitability you need and the freedom you want. Every live masterclass session includes AIA continuing education credit, and when you visit bqe.com/masterclass, you'll have access to the full library of past sessions on demand. The Designing Your Business Masterclass is free, and it's brought to you by our friends at BQE, the makers of BQE Core, the software that makes it easy to manage your projects and people for maximum productivity and ultimate profitability. Register now for the Designing Your Business Masterclass at bqe.com/masterclass. That's bqe.com/masterclass. This episode is brought to you by FreshBooks. There's a lot to love about being an entrepreneur architect, right? But trying to figure out your financials on your own is not one of those things. Luckily, there's FreshBooks, the all-in-one accounting solution that's built for business owners like us. FreshBooks takes all the not-so-fun parts of running a business, from building and tracking invoices to managing online payments to organizing expenses, and automates them with features like the new digital bills and receipt scanner, saving you up to 11 hours per week in the process. 11 hours. FreshBooks has your back at tax time, too. It's almost tax time. With a ton of reports to choose from, you'll know exactly where your business stands, and you can easily hand the keys over to your accountant so they can take over when it's time to reconcile everything for the year. Try FreshBooks. Try FreshBooks for free for 30 days. No credit card required. It's free. Go to freshbooks.com/architect. freshbooks.com/architect to get started today. That's freshbooks.com/architect. So, what will you do with your 11 more hours each week? This episode is brought to you by arcat.com. We all have that one story, that one project that had such a unique situation that it required a solution that you had rarely considered before. We share these stories in private professional circles with our friends and our colleagues, but there has never been a collection of these stories of conflict and triumph all in one place until now. Detailed is a podcast series that features architects, engineers, builders, and manufacturers who share their insights and expertise as they highlight some of the most complex, interesting, and oddball building conditions that they have ever encountered, and the ingenuity it took to solve them. Join host Charisse Lakeside, aka CSI Kraken, a senior specifications writer at RDH Building Science, as she uncovers lessons learned to help you navigate similar challenges that may arise in your next project. Detailed, an original podcast by Arcat. Listen and subscribe right now at arcat.com/podcast. That's arcat.com/podcast, arcat.com/podcast. Detailed. Every building has a story. Please visit our sponsors today and thank them. Thank them for supporting you, the EntreArchitect community. We're living in a very interesting time right now. You and I have lived through this evolution. You know, when we started, they were still drawing on drafting boards, yep. Right? And the computer was introduced to the studio, and it started with one computer in the back of the room with one seat of AutoCAD or whatever they had on it. Maybe not even AutoCAD, probably some other sort of brand of CAD. And it evolved, right? It just kept evolving. It kept growing. Another computer was added to the studio, another computer. Then finally, you know, the drafting boards had computers sitting next to them. And then finally the drafting boards disappeared and the computers were what we used. And it just continues to evolve and evolve and evolve. But because of it being an evolution, there's never been a real intentional design of how the information is managed. It's just we are where we are because that's the evolution that we've come to. And everybody's struggling with that problem right now, right? That yep. BIM has a huge problem. It has tons of information. And that information are files that are all over the place. And every office does it differently, right? They manage it differently, and they organize it differently, and they name it differently, and everybody does it differently. And so we're at that moment where if we don't fix it, because it's only going to become more, right? The information is only getting more information. The drives are getting bigger. The capacity is getting bigger. The capabilities are getting bigger and more impressive. It's just more and more information, and it's not going to stop. It's only going to continue to grow. And so this is a priority at this moment, right?
I think so.
There has to be something that helps firms manage all this stuff and not allow it, like you said, it no longer needs to be where is all that stuff or even how it's organized. If you have a technology that knows what you want and can get it for you and bring it to you, then it doesn't matter where it is or what it's named or what it's called, right? It's just, I need this, and the technology brings it to you so you can very quickly use it.
Yeah, I think the problem used to just be that we were producing more and more information, but all that was living on your network drive or someplace, right? The where was relatively simple. So I think we're in this era now, especially the cloud. Everything's cloud this and cloud that. Well, that cat's not going back in the bag either, right? It's like the where information, I like to say wants to live, not has to live, but wants to live, is increasing. And that I don't think is going to get any simpler. In fact, I think it's going to explode. If you think it's confusing now that you've got something in BIM 360 and some stuff's over in OneDrive, but you're working on a joint venture project with somebody that's using Dropbox, and you've still got some stuff on your local machine, it's like, okay, those are 4 or 5 locations. It's very hard to know where is it. Wait till there's 50 or 100 or right. And that's why, when I talked about that, the internet connected, you can also think about the scale of the problem is also every manufacturer's website that you go to get information, product information from. Those are just another CMS and another external location where there's information. And then if you have to download something from them because they were going to give you a family that you were going to use in your Revit file, now you're downloading that file, and now you've got to figure out where you're going to store it. Right. So it's like, but if you think about that website is just another content management system that you now have to go and interact with. You've got now how many manufacturers' websites are out there? Right, thousands, tens of thousands. So the scale of the problem is we've got all of this information that's being produced, but it's just not connected, and it's relying on the lowest common denominator is a person sitting at their desk trying to put all this back together again. And that's really where we're trying to, we see that as the big problem, and where we're trying to to solve some of that problem. It's very complex, as you can imagine, hard to do, but I also think it's, it's not like we're going to snap our fingers and solve it all overnight, but we've been making some good headway and starting to get the attention of, we've kind of catered to larger. I think the problem exacerbates itself inside of larger firms. They kind of see that the value of, hey, left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, so we got to make sure that they can all touch. But I think it's making its way all the way down to, single-celled organism, right? Yeah. Single person's got the same problem, right?
Yeah, exactly. We're all dealing with the same issues. It's just a matter of the scale of that problem. Randall, when you think to the future, because I know you do, and you imagine what the typical architecture, let's look at sort of a firm of 50 people. Even 5 years from now, it's going to be very different than it is today, right? With the amount of progress technology makes in a year. Not necessarily what technology is going to exist and but what does that studio look like and how does it work? Sort of describe how a typical architect who's doing a typical building project, what do you imagine that's going to be? Because it's going to be very different than it is today.
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the challenges maybe buried in that is that, the people, and this is probably always going to be true. The people that know the most about the newest technology are the youngest people, because they're probably, they're the ones that are kind of either grew up with it or willing to experiment with it. And as we get older, you and I, Mark, it's like, I'm a little less, I'm not on TikTok. It's like, okay, I'm of the age when Facebook came about. I'm on Facebook and I've got friends that are on Facebook, but, I teach a class where I've got a bunch of 20-year-olds. I've got 61 students in my class this semester. And a few weeks ago, I was like, how many of you are on Facebook? One hand went up.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we've got all those challenges, that's probably just a truism that the younger people probably are more up to speed with the newer technologies. But the disconnect there is that they don't have the knowledge. The knowledge is with the older,
right,
the people who've been doing it for a while. So a lot of what we've, when we talk with AVAIL, we also have an eye towards this idea. We use the word knowledge capture, that when we talk about this information management, it's really also about knowledge capture and then dissemination ultimately is what we're
That's a huge issue in our profession, exactly for the reason that you just described, is that there's this generation that is our age and older that have all of this institutional knowledge of how this profession works. And the next generation who is coming in natively with this technology experience but doesn't have access to that knowledge, how do we get that knowledge transferred to the next generation without losing it, right? Because that's what has happened traditionally. Architects retire and that information goes with it. And so every architecture generation has to reinvent how they do things.
You have to, so I think wrapped into your question about what does it look like 5 years from now, I think that the general trend has got to be that that we have to use the technologies that are available to us to try to better capture and transfer that knowledge and information. So we've been doing I'll just give you examples. We've got, initiated a mobile initiative this past year. And you can look at what, a lot of it's like, a lot of our customers are using AVAIL to manage things like drafting view libraries and things like that, as a library system to get back to it. So, I have a friend of mine who's an architect that I went through architecture school with, and I had a PDF with some drafting views on it that was something that a customer was asking us about, and I showed it to him. And he immediately was just looking at these actual details, and he just starts rattling off things that I would have I've never practiced in my life. He's like telling me why the parapet, if you're building it in this climate, it's probably going to look different, and yada yada yada. Right? It's like all this stuff that he's now 30 years in the profession, and he just oozes it. He knows it.
Intuitively knows how to do
Right.
it.
So we've been I'll tie that back. So we've been working on mobile, and one of the things that we've started doing some little prototyping for on the mobile device is actually little redlining tools, markup tools. And what we just said, look, we know people are doing some of this as part of their workflow. Hey, they see a detail, they want to mark it up and pass it back to somebody. You're either doing that in Bluebeam or some piece of software that you're that kind of a workflow. But what I kind of challenged the dev team with was like, first of all, don't think of just redlining. Let's back up a step and say, this is really like an annotation layer on top of this piece of information or content. So in one form, it might be, using a red pen and redlining it, but it could just as easily be me, clicking on it and recording this audio or turning a camera on. So my kind of dream is like, well, if my friend Mike was able to just very easily, while he's redlining on it, why can't you just turn on your microphone and or your camera, and we could be capturing his explanation, his teaching, right? This is, teachers at heart, right? And I think people like to share information. So if we can make that really easy to begin capturing it, and then that's being, going into the system, that's gold for that next person coming in that can just say, yeah, I'll spend 5 minutes listening to you describe why, it's not just move this and do this, but why move this and why is that wrong? So I think the future is you probably never get away from, we've got bright, smart, young people and knowledgeable older people. The only way you get knowledge is to have done it and lived it. So the question becomes, can we get those merged closer and it not just be these giant gaps in between?
Yeah.
And I think technology can help facilitate that.
I agree.
And, so
I think the technology is the key because I think that the next generation, and I know the next generation that is coming in is intuitively sharing, right? They are sharing from birth on the internet. They share everything they're doing at every moment of their life with every friend they have. And so they're going to come to the profession with that expectation that they're going to share their knowledge. And if the technology is there, they will be the ones that encourage the older generation to share that knowledge because the technology is there. And so I think having that ability, that very easy, quick, like you just described, as you're doing the SketchUp, you literally just push a button and now this knowledge can be captured by video or audio, which again, intuitive for the next generation, a little less intuitive for the current generation. But then also to be able to imagine how that accumulates. Right now, that knowledge starts to become part of the process. That knowledge capture is part of our process of architecture and eventually becomes another layer of information. When you go to, like you described, you go to that detail and now there's a button or something that says, click the button. And now you have a sketch that comes over the top of that detail and an explanation of what that sketch meant and at the time and who did it and why he did it and how he did it. And all that information becomes part of that detail, which is amazing when you think about that, and thousands and thousands and thousands of times.
Yep. So the fun thing about building software and technology is just what we described. It's like if you can think it, you can probably build it, right? So that that's what we get to do every day is like, okay, dream this kind of stuff up, and it's like there's always little hiccups along the way, but it's like we can probably the trick is to make it easy, and that's hard. It's usually I like to tell people when something is very easy, that is usually inversely proportional to how complicated it is behind the scenes. So it's usually exactly the opposite. The easier actually you've made it, the more complex, because you're hiding that complexity behind the scenes to make it easy. Google is a perfect example of that. It's very super easy on our side. They make it look easy, but that's a fallacy. And then the inversion. If you open up a piece of software and it's like really complicated, it's like somebody hasn't done the work to design and simplify it, right?
It'll be interesting because I think what you just described with that knowledge capture will probably become like I said, part of the process, right? That it'll be part of AVAIL, it'll be part of Monograph, it'll be part of all these different softwares that architects use. It'll be part of, ArchiCAD or Revit or whatever we're using at the time. And so it'll just be this expectation of knowledge capture, which I hope that's what happens, right? Even what we're doing over at Gable Media is that we'd love to be able to become that technology resource that when somebody wants to create that audio, that we have a way to capture that audio for them in a long format, where the tools will have short format, but we can have long format.
Yep. All the sensors, if you want to back up that far, the things that are capturing the information, they'll be plentiful. Cameras, microphones,
right,
drawing tools. We'll be capturing more and more of the information and data. And then that's the first step, right? Well, we started out, it's like you got to get this information into the system, and then can you build interfaces that you got to have good, what we would call structured data around all of that, so that you can do magical things with it. And then all the stuff that's going on now, we're just in the infancy of machine learning and, broader AI type kinds of capabilities. But that all starts with capturing information, getting it into some form that you can begin to do some processing, watch for patterns in, and then the magical stuff starts to kind of come next, which is okay. Yeah. I've seen, actually I had this experience last weekend when usually when I leave the office and I go home, I try to, not think about work. So I'll turn on the news, and I've got I started, one of my COVID things was I started picking the guitar back up. So I've got an electric guitar, bought a little practice amp, and I've used a little piece of software on my iPad that's connected to my practice amps, and I'll strum, guitar for 20 or 30 minutes when I get home. Well, then I've got different, like a little game that I'll play on my iPad. Well, last weekend, I don't know when it started showing up, but I've noticed it for the first time on my iPad. It has a little window at the top that said, after you've disconnected your Spark amp from Bluetooth, you usually do this, right?
Yeah.
Which I came back to the office. I'm like, look, people, this is what we've been talking about,
because there's tracking your behavior.
It's pattern recognition. And we've probably all seen it in the first place we probably all saw it was the, GPS software. So all of our, I have a breakfast group I go to every Saturday. Well, when I get in my car and turn it on, Google Maps says, you are 17 minutes away from your destination. It knows where I'm going because I've done it for the last 17 years. I've gone to the same breakfast group every Saturday. So there's pattern recognition that happens in that. And, this is what computers are good at. We can, if we're capturing that data, you can begin to look for those patterns. And then, you can think it's weird, right? Creepy, weird. People use all kinds of terms to start, but at some point you just expect it. Once it's inevitable. It's helping you, you turn pretty quickly from that. That's weird to how come this other software is not as smart as that piece of software is, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's part of the evolution of where we are. That's right. We can't stop that. That's already here and happening, and you may not like it, and it may be bad, right? There may be, negative consequences to that.
Yeah, there always are, but I think the good generally outweighs the negatives, and we just have to, you embrace the positives, and then you figure out how to manage the negatives, right?
Yeah. Well, Randall, this has been super interesting, and we can continue. I could talk to you for hours, but we need to wrap things up here. So I want to ask you the one question that I ask everybody. What is one thing that a small firm architect can do today to build a better business for tomorrow?
Yeah, so I think along the lines of what we were just talking about, I think we've probably the last 50 years, that's been probably the advent of the information age. We treat information as like the gold. I know something you don't, and that's my advantage. And I think that we're coming to the end of that. So along the lines of what we just said, we're going to begin capturing all this. I think if I were going to bet on something, I would bet that speed, right? Either doing something way better than everybody else does it, either for a unique customer base, having such experience and knowledge that nobody else wants to get into it, right? And can't compete, and or speed of what you do with that knowledge, right? Helping a customer get something done faster. I think that's I told you earlier that we were trying to think of a new tagline. The reason I put faster on the end of it is that never ends. You always want to do it faster. So it's a nice mission statement to say, how do we even just get faster? And if you watch companies like Amazon, it's like, you thought 3-day delivery was good. Wait till we get it to you in a day. Now it's like, wait till we get it to you in 4 hours. Wait till I get a drone dropping it on your back porch. And, it's like expectation just goes like, okay, how do you compete? You compete by creating things that's very hard for somebody else to, if they haven't invested in those and being able to do that. So I think the firms, have to quit thinking that, hey, I'm the only one that knows this. It's like, look, everybody's got the same drafting views. Everybody's got it's like, that's not what you're going to win on. I think you're going to win on embracing the technology and trying to move faster, be more efficient. It's just going to be the barrier to entry to the game, I think, in the future. So
his name is Randall Stevens. The company is AVAIL. You can learn all about AVAIL and connect with Randall at getavail.com. We'll have links to that on the show notes. Randall, I always enjoy speaking with you. I'm looking forward to speaking with you again in the future because I'd love to have you come back and talk more about this stuff.
Anytime.
It is super interesting to me. I love thinking about the future and where we are today and how we get to that future. And so it's always interesting to have a conversation with you. So I appreciate you for what you're doing at AVAIL and for coming by here and sharing a little bit about you and what you do and for the work that you do. I appreciate you for coming by EntreArchitect Podcast today.
Thanks, Mark. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
If you liked this episode of EntreArchitect Podcast, please share a rating, write a review. Go write a review. I would love to know what you think of this podcast, and it helps other architects find us. So go do 5-star rating if you like it. Share, write a review. I'd love it. And share a link to this episode with a friend, because that's how we've grown. That's how EntreArchitect has grown to serve thousands of architects throughout the world, just like you. Thank you to our sponsors, ARCAT, FreshBooks, and BQE for their support of this episode. I ask you to support them because they support us. And if they're supporting us, they're supporting you. So go support them. Got it? Go support our sponsors. Links to our sponsors. So you can click on those links and go right to them. Links to our sponsors and all the resources we shared today are available at the show notes for this episode at entrearchitect.com/podcast. All the shows are there. entrearchitect.com/podcast. EntreArchitect is a member of the Gable Media Podcast Network. Gable Media is curated thought leadership for an audience dedicated to building a better world. Listen and subscribe to all the shows. I think there are 11 of them there now. Go there, gablemedia.com. That's GABL media.com. And I hope you're going to join us in Austin November 1st through November 3rd, 2022. Those are the dates for the EntreArchitect Community Annual Meeting, our first ever live and in-person conference for you, the small firm architect community. Visit entrearchitect.com/annual meeting right now to learn more. That's entrearchitect.com/annual meeting, and I will see you in Austin in November. Don't miss this. This is going to be great. entrearchitect.com/annual meeting. It's a conference for you, small firm architects. Thank you for listening today to this episode of EntreArchitect Podcast. Love, learn, and share what you know.
Imagine earning continuing education credits while doing exactly what you're doing right now. Well, you can. Gable Media has revolutionized the way you earn your continuing education credits with a groundbreaking approach. Forget running around town and scouring the internet for credit-worthy courses. Fulfill your CE requirements effortlessly by listening to engaging podcasts just like the one you're listening to now. Our podcasts are designed to educate, entertain, and inspire, all in a user-friendly environment. But wait, there's more. Architects, Gable Media is also approved as an AIA continuing education services provider. Upon completion, we handle everything, from reporting your hours directly to the AIA to storing your certificates in your personal Gable Media profile for your self-reporting needs. So follow the link in the show notes and start earning your credits in the most innovative and entertaining way possible with Gable Media.
Attention architects and creative minds, get ready to supercharge your brand with Build Your Brand, the podcast that's unlocking the secrets of branding success for creatives. Hey there, it's Mark Arlepage, founder of Entre Architect, and I'm inviting you to join my friend, architect marketing expert Jeff Eccles at Build Your Brand podcast, where he explores the captivating stories of the world's top brands and transforms their lessons into powerful moves for small firm architects and creatives like you. In Season 1, Jeff shares the thrilling tale of Southwest Airlines, where he dissects their journey to the summit and distills it into strategies tailor-made for you.
It's important to keep in mind that companies like Southwest compete in the real world, just like you, and face real-world challenges, just like you. You might be surprised at how similar those challenges are to the struggles that you grapple with on a day-to-day basis.
Don't miss out on your blueprint for success. Subscribe, tune in, and let's build your brand together.
You may have noticed that the very best brands in the world are also known for having somewhat unique corporate cultures. That's often the glue that holds everything together when they encounter those rough spots.
We don't do it because it inconveniences the passengers to whom we are primarily dedicated, the short haul, frequent flyer.
Follow the link in the show notes to subscribe to Build Your Brand today. Remember, no matter the size, the journey's the same. Your brand's journey to the top starts here.